Muchachos y muchachas, welcome back. Muchachos y muchachas, yesterday we talked about Peter Nygard, his allegations against him, the charges filed against him. He was extradited from Canada over to the U.S. By the Southern District of New York, which is an interesting district. I go into why that's interesting. But today, we're actually going to go through some allegations that are being made against the enablers or the alleged enablers, the madams that have been accused of helping Peter Nygard recruit and enabled him to commit these atrocious crimes that are being alleged of him. So without further ado, one of these individuals at question is a woman by the name of Sue Madeiros. She's an Instagram model. The plaintiff in this particular lawsuit claims that Sue lured her and other young girls to be abandoned at Peter Nygard's residence only to be raped. Stay right there. We're going to go through this lawsuit detail by detail. Times of uncertainty always make me really glad that I always prepare with solar-powered products. The light bug is essentially dependable and widely suitable for outdoor usage in emergency situations such as car repair, fishing, camping, night market, whatever your heart desires that you might need a light. The light bug is solar powered. It can turn sunlight power into electric power, eco-friendly and economical. It's a charging bank. It connects by USB, so you can easily charge your phone anywhere, anytime, or other digital devices. The 180-degree adjustable bracket can bring you different shooting angles, available to be held in hand or put on a table, easily portable. And then it's got a 3 battery indicator light where it indicates 33%, 66%, 100%. This design can show you the battery consumption situation in real time. Order the light bug for your home today. Lowest prices of the year start now for the holiday season special that lets you save up to 51%. Visit the link in my description below to make one yours today. Okay, here we go. This is Sue Madeiros at subject here. So this is the lawsuit, United States District Court, Southern District of Florida, Miami Division. The plaintiff is going by Jane Doe, which is an anonymous entity, versus Sue Madeiros, the defendant. Complaint. Number 1, defendant Sue Madeiros has conspired with Peter J. Nygard by knowingly and actively recruiting young women for Nygard to rape as part of a sweeping international sex trafficking venture. Plaintiff Jane Doe is one such innocent victim of Madeiros recruiting. Madeiros recruited, lured, and coerced Jane Doe to Nygard's private compound, and once confined there, Madeiros told Jane Doe that she was required to have sex with Nygard, instructing her that the forced sex would be really fast and easy. Number 4, after the terrified Jane Doe refused, Madeiros and Nygard conspired to falsely imprison and drug Jane Doe. Nygard then forcibly raped her. Number 5, as referenced in the particular documents mentioned, Nygard and the Nygard companies perpetrated a decades-long international sex trafficking venture centered in New York, but with co-conspirators also located in Florida, California, Canada, and the Bahamas that lured, enticed, and coerced countless girls, women, and boys to be raped. Wow, that is a pretty serious allegation there. So we're talking about children alongside these victims. Girls, women, and boys to be raped. So this is a sick trafficking ring in which sounds like the likes of what we're learning in 2020 with the sick individuals out there that like this preference. It's really disgusting. Number 6, this is a civil action for damages under the United States Federal Sex Trafficking Statute 8 U.S.C. 1591. brought by Jane Doe arising from the defendant Sue Madeiros' trafficking of Jane Doe to Peter J. Nygard and Nygard's subsequent rape of Jane Doe. Defendant Sue Madeiros conspired for years with Nygard, Nygard Inc., Nygard International Partnership, and Nygard Holdings Limited. Collectively, the Nygard companies is knowingly aiding, abetting, facilitating, conspiring, and participating in Nygard and Nygard companies' trafficking of girls and women, including Jane Doe, in violation of the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act and other state laws. So let me just pause here. As you guys may or may not know, there is actually another class action lawsuit against Peter Nygard, and that is what gave this particular person, Jane Doe, the leverage to go ahead and file one herself, as you know, she probably felt empowered and more safe to approach the situation, which, by the way, trafficking victims a lot of times don't want to talk about it. They don't want to bring on a terrifying, traumatizing, process that could possibly also get them in trouble one day. These traffickers, their enablers, they use these fear-based tactics, fear-based coercion to get them to do whatever they want, including not talking. Sue Madeiros conspired in trafficking Jane Doe for Peter Nygard to rape. Madeiros conspired to rape Jane Doe by using Nygard company resources to lure, entice, and transport Jane Doe from Florida to Nygard's compound in the Bahamas, with the pre-planned intention of Nygard raping her. Madeiros was a full-time paid employee of the Nygard companies, but she was really a sex worker for Nygard. As a sex worker, her job was to have sex with Nygard and recruit and lure other young women to have sex with or be raped, sexually assaulted, or sexually battered by Nygard. Madeiros explained her conduct of knowingly luring young women so Nygard could rape them. "I would rather it be them than me. That has to F Nygard," is a quote that allegedly she's citing from Sue Madeiros. For her services of recruiting women for Nygard to rape, Madeiros was paid extensively in cash and benefits by the Nygard companies, including plastic surgery, stem cell injections, jewelry, travel, lodging, and food at Nygard's myriad private compounds, an American Express card with nearly no limit, a Hummer, a DeLorean, a BMW, and a Ferrari. Madeiros even had her own checking account tied to Nygard's sex den compound on 1 Y'all Street in Marina del Rey, recently raided by the FBI as part of its sex trafficking investigation and the site of countless rapes by Nygard. According to flight logs, in just a 4-month period, Madeiros flew on Nygard's private jet on nearly 30 trips. Madeiros was not just one of Nygard's many girlfriends. Madeiros also referred to as his top girlfriend and was a sex trafficker. Number 15, Nygard's girlfriends were paid sex workers and usually victims of Nygard that were manipulated, forced, and or coerced to work as a girlfriend for Nygard. Girlfriends were paid based on their race, ethnicity, physical appearance, the level of sexual conduct they would engage in with Nygard, and also the number of attractive young women they could lure for Nygard to have sex with. Madeiros was for many years considered Nygard's top girlfriend based on her ability, willingness, and proclivity to lure, entice, coerce, and defraud young women to meet Nygard so that Nygard could ultimately rape them. Unlike many of Nygard's girlfriends, Madeiros has consistently denied that Nygard has ever had sexually abused her or had sex with her against her will. In 2010, Jane Doe was an 18-year-old Florida resident and aspiring model when Madeiros invited her to party in Miami, Florida, with the ultimate intention of trafficking her to Nygard. Jane Doe told Madeiros how old she was. Madeiros took Jane Doe to a dance club and illegally provided Jane Doe with alcohol, knowing she was only 18 years old. Madeiros, preying on the innocence of Jane Doe, as well as her dream to be a successful model, lured, enticed Jane Doe to travel to the Bahamas from Florida, telling her that it would be a fun party weekend and that her friend, her friend, owned a fashion company. Madeiros invited Jane Doe, knowing that Nygard would use means of force, fraud, and coercion to engage in commercial sex acts with Jane Doe. According on behalf of and with resources of Nygard and the Nygard companies from the state of Florida, Madeiros, an employee and co-conspirator of Nygard and the Nygard companies, arranged for Jane Doe's flight to the Bahamas, booked through and paid for by the Nygard companies. After arriving at Nygard's private compound in the Bahamas, Madeiros took Jane Doe to meet her fashion designer friend. The friend was Peter Nygard. After arriving, Jane Doe realized that she was not free to leave the Nygard compound, which was surrounded by a fence with barbed wire and a gate guarded by security at all times without Nygard's explicit permission. At the Nygard compound, Madeiros had her own walkie-talkie with her name emblazoned on it, so she could readily communicate with Nygard. While confined within the Nygard compound, Madeiros instructed Jane Doe that she was required to have sex with Nygard against Jane Doe's wishes, stating that she shouldn't worry because sex with Nygard wasn't that bad and would be really fast and easy. Jane Doe refused to have sex with Nygard. Madeiros abruptly informed Jane Doe that Madeiros would be leaving the Bahamas early and Jane Doe would be left there alone. Madeiros then intentionally abandoned Jane Doe on the property, knowing that Nygard would use means of force, fraud, and coercion to engage in commercial sex acts with Jane Doe against her will. While isolated and confined within the Nygard compound, Nygard approached Jane Doe and, using force, instructed her that she was going with him to his bedroom. Nygard forced Jane Doe onto his bed, holding her arms down, ignoring her attempts to tell him no. Nygard then forcibly raped her. The next morning, Nygard handed Jane Doe $500 in U.S. currency as a payment for the rape. Next section. Madeiros knowingly benefited from conspiring in the Nygard sex trafficking venture. Madeiros knowingly benefited from Nygard's sex trafficking of Jane Doe and others. She lived in Nygard's Marina del Rey compound for at least 5 years, received significant cash, jewelry, salary, plastic surgery, stem cell injections, and cars in exchange for trafficking victims, including Jane Doe, to Nygard, which, by the way, is the same way that they enslave and entrap the more or less knowing victims, meaning that they aren't the top chick, they aren't they aren't the top girlfriend, they are lured with the very things, money, jewelry, gifts, in order to get lured into the life, and that's where they really find themselves in a very difficult situation, because they're then entered into a breaking process if that's how the trafficker opts to get them fear-based coerced. They are then controlled, threatened, all types of horrible things. Madeiros' conduct violates the 𝗕𝗵𝗸, which outlines using means of interstate or foreign commerce to recruit, entice, harbor, transport, provide, obtain, and advertise, maintain, patronize, solicit, or lure a person and force, defraud, or coerce that person to engage in commercial sexual acts. Madeiros also aided and abetted Nygard's crimes by conspiring with Nygard to violate the 𝗕𝗵𝗸 by knowingly agreeing to facilitate and enable his illegal conduct for her own gain. Madeiros also directly violated the 𝗕𝗵𝗸 and other state laws because she knowingly benefited from her conspiracy with and or participation with Nygard's venture with knowledge or in reckless disregard of the fact that Nygard sex trafficked Jane Doe and others. Madeiros is actively conspiring with Nygard to lie about their sex trafficking venture. In the summer of 2019, Nygard became aware that the New York Times was actively investigating his sex trafficking venture. Nygard also became aware that FBI and the Department of Justice were also investigating his criminal sex trafficking venture when they raided his New York and California properties on February 26, 2020. In response, Nygard took several offensive measures to try to keep his sex trafficking concealed, including threatening the New York Times, suing the New York Times, concocting conspiracy theories, and enlisting his most trusted girlfriends, including Madeiros and several others, each of whom, upon information and relief, were paid thousands of dollars to keep quiet and lie for him. In 2019, upon information and belief, Madeiros visited Nygard's compound in Winnipeg, pictured below, to do damage control, including concocting lies in which Nygard instructed Madeiros to falsely claim she was always with him for wide swaths of time so she could be his alibi. Defendant Sue Madeiros' conspiracy efforts continue to the filing of his lawsuit. After the filing of Jane Doe's 1-57 versus Nygard et al. Complaint in February 2020 and up to the filing of this lawsuit, Madeiros has been actively conspiring with Peter Nygard and others to orchestrate a concentrated and deliberate effort to protect and conceal Nygard's criminal activities, including his sex trafficking of Jane Doe, by concocting alibis and other ways to lie about the incidents in question. So let me pause there. Let me just kind of break this part down. So remember when I said that this particular Jane Doe probably became empowered to file this lawsuit? Well, that's because there was a class action lawsuit by, I'm going to assume this is 57 individual Jane Does who also filed a lawsuit against Nygard back in February of this year. So this particular lawsuit was filed in October. So this was only just a couple months ago. On June 30th, 2020, Madeiros flew back to Winnipeg to meet with Nygard and others to continue orchestrating a web of lies. Further, in a phone call just weeks before this filing, Madeiros called Nygard out of her concern for her complicit conduct in Nygard's sex trafficking venture. She was instructed by Nygard to stand by and support him. An example, continue lying for him. Information and belief, Madeiros had a phone call on Monday, July 13, 2020 with Nygard civil counsel Jane Doe's number 1-57 versus Nygard et al. Complaint because of concern for her own liability for her trafficking. Madeiros fled the United States for Brazil, where she loitered in the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro and encountered her own legal difficulties there. Madeiros then snuck back into the country and was staying in an apartment of a Beverly Hills plastic surgeon who months ago said he would never be seeing her again and that she would not be returning. Madeiros is to this day communicating regularly with Nygard and continuing to conspire to evade and lie to law enforcement. Jane Doe was prevented from previously pursuing her claims. Madeiros' co-conspirator Nygard is notorious for using his wealth, political power, and influence in Canada and the United States and the Bahamas to intimidate his victims and prevent them from coming forward. That part is very interesting to me. There are, and now I'm just going to say allegedly, although there are photos out there, but allegedly there are photos of Peter Nygard with very prominent figures in politics and also in British royalty, also in English royalty. It's so this, and also there was actually a viewer yesterday who commented on one of the first Peter Nygard videos that I did, and she mentioned something very, very interesting, that the politicians, or there was a prominent politician in the Bahamas that actually allowed Peter Nygard to get away with a lot of that stuff. So these are little bits and pieces that are just kind of just thrown in this lawsuit, but that's very interesting that he knew political power influences in Canada, the United States, and Bahamas to, allow his intimidation on his victims and allow him to get away with all the things he did. Allegedly. Nygard also uses violence, threats of violence, bribery, and corruption to intimidate and silence his victims. And those that he believes have betrayed him. Nygard has silenced his victims by, among other means, having their tires slashed, committing arson, hiring thugs to intimidate his victims, having his victims followed, engaging in murder for hire plots, and otherwise threatening his victims with death. Okay, I could only imagine what would have gone on behind closed doors, being so aggressive and violent. This is quite an allegation. This is pretty serious. Nygard also routinely threatens to use his wealth to sue and destroy the reputation of anyone who comes forward to report his crimes. Due to Madeiros' conspiracy with Nygard and her close association with victims, Due to Madeiros' conspiracy with Nygard and her close association with him as his top girlfriend and recruiter, Jane Doe legitimately feared for her life, as well as other forms of retaliation if she pursued claims against Madeiros for trafficking her to Nygard. Okay, let me just pause. I could not imagine the fear that these sex trafficking victims that are victimized by the very powerful elite of our world, how scared they must be. I mean, I know that I came from a trafficking attempt of my own, where, I escaped the situation, but it wasn't by these big moguls or big names in the industry, you know what I mean? And even that was really scary in itself. But this, I could not imagine not just one big fashion mogul who is elite and has all these connections to politicians and, security, law enforcement, probably even, allegedly, that's just a speculation that I have, but also could have also had handlers and enablers like what is being alleged here with the Instagram model to also intimidate her into being complicit and obedient to his wants. It wasn't until Nygard was sued in a class action lawsuit as well as investigated by the FBI that Jane Doe felt she could pursue this claim without risk of harm or death. Parties: plaintiff Jane Doe. Jane Doe is a United States citizen who resides in the United States. She is using a pseudonym because of the highly personal nature of this matter. Plaintiff is at serious risk of retaliatory harm because of defendants' co-conspirators. Nygard and the Nygard companies have tremendous wealth and power and have used it to retaliate against others who have attempted to come forward, including by means of arson, property destruction, threats of physical violence, and threats of legal action. Plaintiff is also vulnerable because of the defendant's co-conspirators' wealth, and influence in Canada and the United States, and the corruption of law enforcement. See, what did I say? Law enforcement by the co-conspirators through bribery and political influence. Plaintiff's safety right now to privacy and security outweigh the public interest in her identification. Plaintiff's legitimate concerns outweigh any prejudice to defendants by allowing plaintiff Jane Doe to proceed anonymously. Defendant Sue Madeiros is a United States resident and considers herself an Instagram model and historically was a dancer in music videos. Upon information and belief, defendant regularly travels to the state of Florida and conducts business there, including modeling and attending modeling events. Okay, so the rest of the lawsuit is really technical law language, and it fashions everything that we read at the top part of the lawsuit. It fashions it how the defendant would have violated the law in technical terms. So I'm going to leave this document in my description below. So if you do want to go through the technicalities, you can do that. But we did go through majority of the lawsuit, the detailed allegations. That's really the goal of this particular video. I wanted to give you guys insight as to what is being alleged and how. And so majority of that was on page 1 through a little bit over 9, so 1 through 10. And then the rest of the document is really the technicalities applied to the violation of law. So anyway, I'll leave this document in my description below if you do want to go through the technicalities and how it applies to the violation of law. Guys, thank you for exploring the details of this lawsuit with me. If this is something that interests you, then I will be doing the next allegation, which is April 𝗕𝗨 versus Angela Dyborn. So it's sort of the same situation. Angela Dyborn is the alleged trafficker or enabler, and allegedly Angela Dyborn is Peter Nygard's niece. April 𝗕𝗨 is a trafficking victim. If you're interested in that, that will be coming up later today. And hey guys, if you think I do a great job, please go to natlydenise.com/donate, or there are other means in the description below to gift something reoccurring. This is now my full-time job, and I'm heavily dependent on you at this point. So I appreciate all of your love, all of your support. I will see you guys in the next video.